Hi, and welcome to the Good Goobyes Funeral Myth-Busting podcast. On the show, you will hear us, your hosts, Simon, a funeral director, and Tina, an independent celebrant, chat about all things funerals, death, and dying to help you navigate the planning of your good goodbye for yourself or the people in your lives.
Sometimes we have funeral industry guests, and sometimes we just chat through funerals, death, and dying. We do this with kindness and sometimes humour. We're based in Devon in the UK, and we hope you enjoy the show ahead. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Good Goobyes. You're here again with Tina, and I have a guest here with me today called Anna May, who I'm going to allow to introduce herself. Anna has been doing some work around the Student Grief Network, and she's got some amazing things to share. So it's an absolute joy to have you here with us, Anna May. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Tina. It's lovely to be here.
Now, Anna May, tell us a little bit about the beginning. What happened in your life that made the Student Grief Network begin to take shape?
Yeah, so the Student Grief Network really has come initially from my personal experiences. It's grown into something that actually is much bigger than that. But in those early days, I was studying at the University of Leeds, and I had lost my brother when I was 10 years old. And essentially, when I got to university, I thought that this was something that was in the past. You know, I thought it's been almost 8 years since my brother, his name was Benny, since Benny died. And I'd done a pretty good job at putting it in a box and trying to ignore the impact that it had on my life. I think a lot of people do this. And especially, you know, I was about to go to secondary school. I was becoming a teenager. I didn't want to be the girl whose brother had died. And I also I don't think I had the tools or the support to really deal with the impact of that loss. So I put it in a box. I thought, I'm fine, I'm good. And when I went to university, it kind of came and hit me in the face. I think moving away from home, trying to figure out who I was as an adult, meeting lots of new people, experiencing new things. While that was very exciting in some ways, and a lot of the experiences I had at university were really positive, but I also think that transition was really challenging, and it kind of brought a lot of old wounds to the surface. And I realised that actually a lot of the challenges I was experiencing, so I was feeling quite anxious a lot of the time. I was finding it difficult in some ways to connect with people around me. I was feeling very overwhelmed and sad at different points. I couldn't work out what had brought it on. I kind of started to join the dots and realised, oh, this might actually have something to do with that childhood experience. And I kind of built the courage to, instead of running away from it and putting it in a box again, actually looking it in the eye. And I started listening to loads of podcasts about grief. I probably watched about 10 TED Talks in a day. One time I got a bit obsessed. And yeah, I started to be really curious about it instead. And I started to think, how many other students are there that maybe have experienced this? Because no one was talking about it. And so in some ways it felt really lonely, because I was like, oh, I'm dealing with these massive issues and life questions. And everyone else, it kind of felt like was just having fun. Turns out actually a lot of students are also dealing with it. And so when I started to kind of have those conversations, I found lots of people in similar situations who did want to talk about it. And we started to form a kind of informal space to discuss it. I also then in my final year at university also lost my dad, which was another massive blow. He'd been ill for a couple of years. So some of my time at university was pretty stressful in that I knew that he was unwell. He had lots of hospital appointments. He'd been in the ICU in hospital for a little while. He'd been in a coma essentially, and I'd thought that I was going to lose him, and then he got better. And then, I was also then coming back to university and getting on with exams and trying to have fun with my friends, but knowing all of this was going on at home. And I think that's when I first understood what anticipatory grief was, which was a phrase that I'd never heard before, but it's like this grief that you can experience before someone even dies, which comes with a lot of fear. It comes with a lot of it's very hard to put your finger on it because the person is still there. And I think I felt a lot of kind of almost guilt for feeling the grief because he was still there, and I didn't want to jinx it almost by feeling this loss. So I was dealing with all of that during my time at university. And then when I went into my final year, he had an operation and it went wrong and he died. And I then had to kind of process this loss, not just the earlier loss of Benny, but also now losing my dad. And on top of that, having questions around should I be at home? Should I be living in Leeds, which is a city almost 5 hours away from where I was brought up? Should I take time out? Should I carry on? Do my studies even mean anything anymore? And so I feel like I brought both of those personal experiences into my work with the Student Grief Network, for students that have experienced a loss before they came to university and for those that experience something during their studies. There's a lot of overlap in the challenges they experience and the support they might need, but there are also differences as well. And of course, like I said earlier, this is not just about me, it's a much bigger picture because everyone experiences loss differently. People have different relationships with people. Some people might not have even had a relationship really with the person that's died, and their story is important too. Someone might have come from a very different background to me. Their perspective needs to be brought in. So since setting it up, I've had conversations with over 100 students, probably closer to 1,000 now, and really trying to lean on all of those perspectives. So it's not just for one sort of person, one type of loss, but encompassing many, many different forms of grief and many different ways that we can experience it because it is different for everyone.
I think that's the only commonality about grief is that everyone experiences it differently. I mean, there are common threads, I agree. But goodness me, we bring our own selves to it, and each and every one of us is completely different and experiencing life in a different way, aren't we? So our personal impact. And thanks for sharing something so deeply personal, Anna May. It's a hell of a lot to go through in any point in your life. But when you're in a really transitional point in your life, which is, going to a university to become something different potentially, both through the experiences you're having in living independently. For some people, the first time in their lives, and for others, they're transitioning to, becoming something else in their life. It's often a staging post for the next bit of you, isn't it? And listeners won't be aware of this. So as well as being a celebrant, I work in a university as a teacher, teaching nurses, as a lecturer. And because of the two spaces that I occupy, it really was in my head that I was coming across some students that had loss. And the university that I work in, there'd been a loss of a tutor, which was really unexpected, which impacted a whole range of people that wouldn't normally be impacted upon in that way, because it was a colleague as well as someone that the students knew as a, quite a beloved tutor. So that doesn't turn up a lot. But also coming across students who, had lost grandparents, had lost family members, and were in university saying to me, well, everyone presents university as an absolute party time. And for some people, it is very uplifting and joyous. And there are joyous moments in those 3-4 years, aren't they? But also they were saying, well, it's also all of a sudden you're in your room, you've unpacked and you're like, you've landed and you are on your own, and it can feel like you are on your own. So I've had that presented to me as kind of a way that people already feel a little bit wrong-footed by the environment, and then they have this thing called grief on top, and it makes them feel a certain way.
Yeah, I think it's a really unstable time. I mean, it's a bit of a paradox, university. And obviously you get some mature students that maybe, but most students are 18, 19 when they go to uni. you're kind of still a child, but you're also an adult. You want the freedom, but you also need support. I think even if you haven't had some massive kind of life event happen, it can be pretty testing. So it is that contradiction of being both a space for experimentation and new experiences and figuring out who you are and having lots of fun, and also being pretty challenging and confronting and lonely, and bringing up challenges that maybe you haven't had to deal with before. And then when you're experiencing with some sort of challenge, like, losing someone who's close to you, that I think, makes it quite, it's not unmanageable, because I know lots of students that do manage it. And I don't want to be, you kind of want to acknowledge how difficult it is while also giving people hope that it is possible to do. But I think we need a lot more in place from universities to support those students, and also just culturally, so like friends know how to talk about them. So we have the language ourselves. It's definitely not an issue that is just within universities. It's a much wider social issue that we kind of need to get more comfortable having those challenging emotional conversations.
That's why I was so pleased that you were able to join me for this chat, really, because it's something like 10% of students will experience a loss in their 3 to 4 year, university program. And that, it's not a humongous figure, but it's big enough. So 10% is a lot of people. And having something in place for those people and opening up those conversations, I think, is a really important thing to be doing. So what are the universities that you're engaged with? What are the things that they're putting in place that you're thinking are really helpful, Anna-May?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of great stuff that universities are doing. I think there's always more to do, but I know that like student services teams are working really hard. So the universities that I see that are doing it really well will be offering multiple things for their students. So it's not just saying, oh, you've experienced a bereavement, here's a referral to counselling. That might be something that helps some students, and it's great to have as an option. But are there other ways that you can support them? They might actually need practical support. So they might experience losing a parent, for example, might bring up financial challenges. So maybe you need support in that way. Maybe it will change your housing situation. You might need support with housing. And then also, some students, they may not want to go to counselling or go to a support group. They might just want to look at resources online. So then it's like, how do you make students aware that, there are podcasts that you can listen to, or videos you can watch, or ways that you can kind of be engaged, but without having to make that scary step of actually attending something. So I think offering that variety of things, and also like some things that address grief really specifically. So for example, if there's a peer support group which is for bereaved students, that's amazing. But it might also be, like I know at the University of Bath, for example, they've got like a social prescribing program, which is like, I can't remember exactly what they offer, but they just pluck some examples out, like walks or gardening or just like coffee and chat, and like those sorts of things that they might not address grief specifically, but it's about building community with students and helping people feel less alone. And because some people will want to be part of that without having to actually talk about the grief as well. And then others will want to have more direct stuff which does address it face on. So I think both of those things. And also universities need to not just think about what support is offered, but think about the policies that are in place that reduce harm in the first place. So if someone discloses that they've just lost someone, or maybe they've got an anniversary coming up and they're really struggling, that their life isn't made harder by kind of like the policies and like the hoops that they have to jump through. So just having compassion, making sure staff are trained, making sure that the forms that people are filling in use language which is understanding and kind and human and doesn't overwhelm people or doesn't make people feel like their experience doesn't matter. So I think, there's lots of different angles. And I published the Higher Education Bereavement Framework last year, and this very much was trying to bring all of these things together. So it covers 5 key themes, and basically it's showing universities that to really look at this, we can't just look at counselling, we can't just look at policies, we can't just look at communication. We have to think about it as a whole. And I don't mean that to scare universities off, because it can seem like a pretty big task, but taking small steps, but keeping that bigger picture in mind as well.
But I think it's, if we look back in time, even something like inclusivity, for those who are neurodiverse, I mean, that's a journey for universities that they probably would have viewed as a bit overwhelming a few years back, and now are well on the way to improving all the time, opening the access and making that a better experience for students. So it feels doable, but it feels like we all need to start together. And I know not all universities are kind of doing it at the same time. And I guess if you're a listener to this podcast and you're associated with a university, something that you could certainly, take a look into. I'll put the links in for Anna May's Student Grief Network website and how to reach her, because there are lots of ways that you can get involved. And it was interesting when I was on your website, Anna May, that I picked up that university staff, feel awkward talking to students about it. So tell me a bit more about that. What did you discover and what's been helpful?
Yeah, so I have had, personal experiences of staff members feeling awkward, and also a lot of students share that that's been their experience. But I don't want this to be something that is a blame thing. It's culturally, we are not set up to talk about death and dying and grief. It's something that is notoriously difficult. And I think people feel awkward, not because they don't care, but because they really care and they don't know what to say and they don't want to get it wrong. And also they might not know where someone can go. So they're like, I don't have any tools in my toolbox.
Yeah, they don't feel they've got the signposting.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also because it's something that we can't fix with grief, it's this huge experience that we kind of just have to go through. We can't find ways around it. It's a bit like, what's that story? Going on a bear hunt and you can't go over it. You can't go under it. You've got to go through it.
Yeah.
And I think that is really, if you're a student support staff or a personal tutor, you're going to want to have ways that you could help someone go around it. But actually, it's about sitting in that discomfort and sitting with the big emotions. So it's kind of no wonder people feel a bit awkward with that. But what we can do is equip staff through training, through education, whether that's that we have a half-day training program. It might be that you do that, but it could also be that you just watch a 5-minute video to start with. It doesn't have to be massive, just to start thinking about just helping you feel a bit more comfortable with the situation and just being like, it's okay if I don't have the answers. I'm going to just try and be here with the student. And I might say the wrong thing, but at least I'm saying something and at least I'm showing them that I care, because I think your approach and the way that you're showing care is much more important than what you actually say.
Yeah. I mean, the underlying compassion means so much, doesn't it? And not in recent years, but in my 20s, because I'm a little bit older than Anna May listeners, I had at one point in my life 3 grandparents, because my mum had remarried. So I had a grandparent from my birth father, my mum's mum, and my stepfather's mum. So I had these 3 grandparents. And I started my nurse training. So I was in my early 20s, and 2 of my grandparents died very closely together. So I went into my workplace and my paternal grandmother had died. And I said to my workplace, I need some time off for my grand's funeral, and they gave it me. And at the time, we only had a few days, but that was my allocation. And I went off to the funeral and did whatever you do at those times. And then about a week later, I hadn't been back at work a few days when my maternal grandmother died, and I was very close to her. So it felt more impactful. And I went again to my manager and said, oh gosh, I've had this death in the family, my grandmother died. And she said, well, how many grandparents have you got? You'll run out soon. And I remember really well, Anna May, just thinking, I just even don't know what to say. I had no words. And it kind of was that lack of compassion and that inference that I just found a way to get some time away from work. So I
think quite a lot of I get this argument sometimes when I'm talking about, making policies more flexible, for example, to allow students to have extensions on their essays, and you do get people saying, what happens if they're making it up? And there will probably be some students that make something up because they need an extension, but that is a slim proportion. And actually, if one person out of 10 gets away with that, but the other 9 people are supported through something that is genuinely difficult, it's worth, having that flexible policy. I think there's also, like, with grandparents, for example, or with various like cousins or friends, there's an assumption that the relationship is not that close and therefore people aren't going to be that impacted. But we don't know what someone's relationship is. And we also don't know what kind of coping mechanisms they have in place, if they've had earlier traumas in their life that might make them less resilient or more resilient. We're very quick to judge, I think, how much time someone is going to need off or how much support someone's going to need. And we just never know. No. 2 people might lose the same person, but have completely different responses to it. And we don't know what other things they've got going on in their life. Like, someone might lose a grandparent, but they might be named on the will. They might be someone that is having to sort out a lot of the logistics. It might be their remaining grandparent that they lived with. They might also have a child that they're looking after. They might also be in a difficult relationship they're struggling. Do you know what I mean? We can't see the whole picture. So I think compassion and curiosity is needed regardless of the situation.
You almost do have to just start with a blank slate and think, I really don't know. And exactly. I need to through gentle questioning and support, see what this person feels they need from me. Because I came across a student once who, as a result of a death in the family, was now going to be the immediate carer of somebody, in their family with a learning disability. They were the named person and guardian, and that really changed things for them. So, you absolutely don't know. So in a way then, so all these things and structures that we hope will be taken up and embraced by people and change the way that we societally talk about grief. How has this experience changed anything for you? Because I know you write as well and you're an artist. So what's helped you and what have you learned that might have been surprising, Anna May, as you've kind of gone on this journey of building a student grief network?
Yeah, I guess I've learned so much about myself. I mean, I kind of went into it. I thought I went into it because I wanted to help other people. And when I look back, I realized that I really needed help. And it was my way of kind of channeling that. I've learned so much about what different people are going through, what different factors influence how we experience the world, how we cope with difficult things, how we experience joy, the kind of thing. There's so much to this. I think people often think that my job must be, pretty difficult at times and like make me feel a bit low. But actually, it's been so life affirming to be able to meet people in really difficult, dark places and to be able to come through that with them. And kind of connect with people at a very real level. I feel very lucky that I meet people, whether it's through the workshops that we run or on LinkedIn or they send me a message on Instagram, whatever it is. And I suddenly have this connection because we're speaking to each other at a very real level, which I don't think most people get in their day-to-day jobs. Because immediately I've shown myself to be vulnerable and to be a human. And then people kind of bring that back to me. And that feels like such a privilege. So yeah, I've learned a lot about people, learned a lot about myself as well, about the things that I need in difficult times, how far I can kind of push my boundaries, how much I have to give, but how much that takes, and how much I also have to lean on other people and receive. I think anyone working in this field or any sort of role where you're helping other people, at some point you learn, it's really important that you are asking for help and you're, allowing that in. And I've also learned a lot about, in the early days, I was very focused on all the difficult conversations and the importance of embracing the difficult emotions, our pain, going into our grief, talking about stigmatized stuff. And I'm still an advocate for all of that, but I've also realized that healing, I know some people don't like that word, but I'm going to use it in this instance. It also really relies on being playful and curious and allowing joy in and having more light-hearted conversations and sometimes allowing yourself to be distracted. Like, we can get very caught up in the difficult stuff and we need a bit of that. We need to go into that, but we also need to allow ourselves to move forwards. And I think as time's got on, that has been such a gift that the Student Grief Network has given me, that I have both of those things. I have this serious part of me that can look at the sad stuff, and I also have a very light-hearted side to me that has gradually come through. I think that was one thing that I felt really, as a student in particular, when I wanted to be fun, and I felt like I'd lost that carefree side to me, but I've actually reconnected with that now. I don't know. I feel like I've gone on a bit of a tangent. I don't know if I've quite answered your question.
No, that was a lovely answer. I loved it because all answers were a bit incomplete because it's never, the job is never done, is it? So I liked what you said, and I just would encourage listeners just never to be afraid to enter conversations or to laugh. I mean, I was the other day. There's a place near where I live in the seaside town of Torquay called Cockington, and it has a gorgeous lake and lots of beautiful spring blossoms. Usually the camellias and the rhododendrons and all those kinds. They're just lush there. They're incredible, and they're one of the biggest magnolia trees in the country, I think. So me and my daughter were drifting along there, and there was a new bench, so we sat on it and we were enjoying the scenery, and there was a lady. She was sort of hanging around in the periphery, and it was almost like a funny little scene because she was poking out from behind a tree, and I thought at one point, what is going on? So of course then
she's going to come out under the bench.
I know. Then she kind of got the confidence to approach us and said, "Do you mind terribly if I shared the bench with you?" And then told us that it was only just been put there and it was for her friend. And she wanted to sit on his bench. She wanted to remember him. And we sort of hopped off it and went, "Oh, God, we're so sorry we've been hogging his bench." And we had a bit of a laugh. And she said, "Oh, you would have thought that was hilarious." And then we just had a bit of fun about, the scene of her trying to get to the bench and whether we should put reserved on it and just all this lovely conversation. And then we read his dedication together with this lady. And then we wandered off and she said, "I'm just going to go through some of his messages. I've still got them on my phone." And he was so hilarious. He still makes me laugh. And then we were further around the lake and we sat on another bench and we could see her in the distance laughing, sitting on this bench. So honestly, it was so magical, Anna May. And I just thought that whole interaction really was about loss. With some comedy moments, and but it was about life as well. Sitting there with all this burgeoning spring around us. It was a kind of a really strangely complete and magical kind of little moment. And I'm a bit like you because I inhabit this space where I talk about death and dying and grief and loss. That comes to me quite a lot, actually. Moments that are unexpected and wise and kind and just a little bit glorious, really. So I kind of I understand what you were saying. I think about you. It's surprising where it can take you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm always slightly cautious about putting silver linings onto grief and like, you know, I don't want to force anyone to think that they should be growing from this difficult experience or, you know, that they're failing if they don't have that. But it is amazing how over time and with the right support, how many people find these kind of magical parts of grief. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but it can open up our experience to connect with life in quite a new way. And there is loss in that because sometimes that new is really difficult, but sometimes, you know, there is humour or connection or gratitude as well.
And I think what always intrigues me about this kind of conversation is when people think things are very linear. And you know, we know that you could be happy, sad in the same moment.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
You can be crying and laughing,
yeah,
in the same
I've done
moment.
that plenty of times.
Yeah.
Well, you can think, you know, it's been 18 years since my brother died and about 8 years since my dad died. And sometimes I feel like life is pretty good. Like most of the time I'm like, yeah, I'm stable, I'm grounded, I'm happy. And then there are weeks where I think it kind of all comes crashing down. And so you're right, it's not linear. I think there's a bit of a misconception that grief, you kind of start getting better and then you get better and better and then it's gone. But actually it's more like a spiral or an onion where there's layers. And that doesn't mean that you're not moving forward. It doesn't mean that you're not, you know, learning about yourself and growing. But some days it will just still feel rubbish. And some days I don't want to talk about those moments of magic and joy and connection. I just want to, you know, punch a pillow and shout that it's not fair. And that's also fine.
I know. And I think that's right. And I think that it's hopefully comforting in its own way to listeners who are thinking, well, God, I don't feel all sorted because, you know, it's 7, nearly 8 years since my mum died and it's her birthday tomorrow. And I really start thinking it ramps up for me around this time. And I every year I end up thinking about her in some way that kind of like makes me feel the loss of her still. But that's okay, you know, and I went to a place that is still open that she loved to have a scone in Devon, and had a scone the other day and thought, God, you know what, this is still here and my mum just loved it so much. So you know, you do what you can, I think, to just navigate those moments. I think it's a fair thing to say, isn't
Next year you might feel great and the year after that you might feel a deep sadness, and you know, you can't really predict it, can you?
No, just take it in its stride. So people finding their way to the Student Grief Network, do you have to be a student at university where it exists? Or if you're a student listening to this, or you know a student you think would benefit, what's a good thing to do?
So there's a couple of ways that we work. So we work with students, but also if you're about to go to university, you might not be a student yet, or you might have graduated. I think what we have is still relevant. So the main way that we work with students is through our resources on our website, and anyone can look at those. So there's various guides to kind of help you understand what grief is, how it might impact you, how you can cope with it. And you can read student stories, you can watch videos. A lot of that is basically just showing people that they're not alone. I think it's really underestimated the power of just seeing someone else experience something similar to you. And then there are various peer support groups running at different universities. So it's always worth looking on your wellbeing pages and seeing if there is something, or asking, like sending an email and saying, is there something for this? Because you never know what there might be. And you can keep an eye on our website and on our social media if we're running any events or workshops coming up as well. We also signpost to some brilliant charities like Winston's Wish, Suicide & Co, The New Normal, for example. Let's Talk About Loss. Just name dropping the ones that come to mind, who do amazing stuff around the country. And then the other part of our work is actually more with university staff and institutions themselves. So that's through the training and consultancy work that we do. And we can go onto campuses and run events. So you can find information about that. And that's trying to, I guess, implement more sustainable changes so that basically we want to become redundant. We don't want students to need us. At the moment, we do need to be here and we do need to exist. But hopefully, as time goes on, universities will be more and more equipped to kind of support students themselves. But yeah, going to our website, which is studentgriefnetwork.co.uk, is probably the best place to start.
Fantastic. And to give you the final word then, what do you hope listeners take away from this conversation about grief and community and being human at university?
Oh, I hope that people feel part of a human community. Whether you're listening to this and you've had a really difficult personal experience, whether you've not really experienced loss before, but maybe your friend has, or maybe it's something that you've never spoken about before. I think this is a conversation for all of us. And the more that we can kind of approach these things, we've spoken quite a lot. It's actually been quite an uplifting conversation today. And we have spoken about those moments of laughter and connection and joy. But I think we can't skip ahead to get there. We kind of have to go sometimes through the darkness and embrace the more difficult parts of ourselves and the more difficult parts of our experience in order to lighten the load. I kind of think of it, I'll leave you with this metaphor, which is I think about grief in the early days for me was like a massive balloon in my chest. And it felt like it was taking up all the space. It was physically uncomfortable. I couldn't think about anything else. And it didn't go away until I started talking about it. Until I started, for me, I used my art and my writing as expression as well. And every time I let out a little bit, it let out a little bit of air. So it wasn't that it all disappeared all at once. And the balloon is still in there. And sometimes it gets a bit bigger and sometimes it gets smaller. But basically we can very slowly, gently, when we feel ready, because we don't want to force this either, because it's really, really hard sometimes. But if we just let out little bits here and there, it does loosen the pressure. And then we start to feel more spaciousness in our life. And we start to have more room to feel happy again and to grow and to find some of the wisdom that comes from that grief. But we can't jump ahead to that. So I guess the message would be, let yourself in small doses talk about it, think about it, be kind to yourself. I've learned so much about self-compassion and being gentle with myself and not beating myself up for feeling something, and giving myself the support that I would to a friend. But it is definitely possible to, there have been moments when I honestly thought my life was over and it couldn't have got any worse. And it's got better, and it does get better, but we have to kind of address it in order for that to happen.
Well, that's just the most amazing place to end our conversation. I'm going to put everything that Anna May has said in the show notes in relation to all the
Thanks for listening to Good Goodbyes. We hope you found it helpful and informative. Please do leave us feedback, other topic suggestions, and subscribe for a regular listen and like and share if it all helps the show.
We're always interested to know what topics you like us to talk about, so do reach out to us if you have any ideas. If any topic leaves you thinking you need additional help or support, please do seek out professional advice. Take care and be kind to one another.